Welcome to the special meeting of the Springfield City Council. It is now 5:05 on June 16th, Tuesday, June 16th. And Madam Clerk, can we please call the roll?
Councilor Gomez,
I just want to say happy birthday to my daughter and to Tupac Shakur. I'm here and present.
here and present. Councilor Whitfield,
Present.
present. Councilor Davila,
Present.
present. Councilor Fenton,
Present.
present. Councilor Curran,
Present.
present. Councilor Ramos, present. Councilor Walsh,
Yeah, President, happy birthday to my grandson.
present. Councilor Williams,
Present.
present. Councilor Allen,
Present.
present. Councilor Letterman,
Present.
present. Councilor Edwards,
Present.
present. Councilor Brown,
Present.
present. Councilor Hurst.
Present. So we are also joined by some members of the media. This is being recorded, so it will be able to be streamed and watched afterwards. In addition, we are joined by attorney Leo, I believe, as well as attorney Lesser. So we have one order of business to handle in this special meeting. Is there anyone present wishing to speak to this order?
Can you read the order?
It is,
Yeah.
If we could raise our hands in the queue,
Okay.
so that we're not interjecting, Councilor Walsh, but I'm sure we can read the order. Is there anyone present to speak to the order? Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Do we have the raise our hand feature here? Is it?
I believed that I did raise my hand. Mr. President, I apologize just for the, I know we're in a special meeting, but are you planning to hold a pledge?
No, I don't think we normally do it for the special meeting, but we certainly, we can. Sure. In fact, since you asked, let's do it. Everybody please rise for a moment of silence. Will you please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge of allegiance
To the flag
States
of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our colleagues for being here today in a special meeting. I'm here today with colleagues to present on an order that was filed, the single order for the special meeting today, which is an order to authorize the President, Justin Hurst, to sign a letter of engagement with pro bono legal counsel to advise the City Council with regard to our ongoing dispute relative to the installation of a Board of Civilian Police Commissioner. As folks know, including folks that have been working on this issue since prior to my involvement in the City Council, the City Council passed in 2016 over a mayoral veto an ordinance to restore a civilian Board of Police Commissioners, a 5-member civilian board with the power to run the policies of the Springfield Police Department, as well as the hiring, firing, and discipline practices. That ordinance was set, I believe, to go into effect upon the expiration of the commissioner at that time's contract. And in 2018, our body, when I was a member, voted to bring that ordinance further into compliance with the city charter by eliminating a provision that had previously called for City Council confirmation, and to also bring that ordinance in 2018 into effect immediately to the extent possible under the contract that still existed with former Commissioner Barbieri. As we know, that ordinance has remained on the books in the city of Springfield. However, it has not been implemented. The mayor has not appointed, as is within his authority by the ordinance, the Board of Police Commissioners. And this has, obviously been a point of contention between the administration and the city council. And I think also we hear pretty regularly, especially as we engage in the dialogues that are very necessary today, from members of the public who are seeking clarity on the status of the Board of Police Commissioners. And so in light of all of that, the attorneys who are with us today, Attorney Tom Lesser and Attorney Mike Alio, had reached out. In the past, the City Council has publicly stated that we would be in favor of, if appropriate legal counsel would come forward, exploring our legal options with regard to enforcement of this ordinance. And Attorney Lesser and Attorney Alio have come forward to offer their legal services. They are both well-respected and capable attorneys, and so I am in favor of authorizing the president to sign an engagement letter with them through the passage of this order. And what the order authorizes is, it says, "Be it ordered that the Springfield City Council hereby retains the pro bono legal services of the law offices of Lesser, Newman, Alio, and Nasser LLP, and specifically Attorney Thomas Lesser and Michael Alio, to represent it in our dispute with the mayor of the city of Springfield concerning the enforcement of the ordinance that established the Board of Police Commissioners, which is codified in sections 37 through 84, 67 through 96 of the City of Springfield Municipal Code. And be it further ordered that the Springfield City Council authorizes the law offices of Lesser, Newman, Alio, and Nasser LLP to provide legal advice to the City Council with regard to the dispute described above, and if directed by a vote of the City Council, to bring an action to litigate this dispute in the courts of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And be it further ordered that the Springfield City Council hereby authorizes its president, Justin Hurst, to sign and execute an engagement letter between the Springfield City Council and the law offices of Lesser, Newman, Alio, and Nasser LLP for the purposes of the above referenced representation. The only thing further that I will say is two items before, without objection, I turn it over to the individuals who have stepped forward to introduce themselves to the council. But what I would say is relative to two items. Number one, I think that all of our goal is to reach a resolution in this dispute. We recognize that no system is going to be perfect, but as we move forward in our discussions with the community and with fellow elected representatives, we need to have an understanding of who has what authority, and we have up until that point had that being in question. I think that it makes it difficult as we discuss the future if we haven't resolved the disagreements of the past. And so I think it's very important for us to come to a resolution, and if seeking outside counsel can help us arrive at that resolution, I'm certainly in favor of that. The only other piece is it may be appropriate to amend the order somewhat in consultation, speaking with the attorneys. It really is the two of them who would be providing the legal advice to us. And so we may want to just further specify that it is actually Attorney Tom Lesser and Attorney Mike Alio who would be doing that on our behalf in a pro bono, free of charge basis. And so with that said, without objection, I would invite the attorneys to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their background and their interest in supporting the council in that hope of resolution.
So I know there are some hands raised. So counselors, if we could just be patient and allow Attorney Alio as well as Attorney Lesser just to introduce themselves, and then we can open the floor up to all of your questions before we take a vote. Attorney Alio or Lesser, if you want to speak at this time, feel free.
Sure. My name is Tom Lesser. I'm an attorney in Northampton. I've practiced for over 40 years. I've practiced regionally. I've represented municipalities in the past. I've represented many citizens groups with regard to issues with municipalities. I've done some preliminary research on the issue, and it appears to me that the City Council has the power, it's written in the charter and in Massachusetts law, to establish departments within the city government. And that's exactly what the City Council did in this case. No more, no less. It established a board of police commissioners, and it then became the mayor's job to appoint the members.
So attorney, if we could just not necessarily speak to your view on the particular issue itself, and just more so give an introduction, and if at a later date folks would like to go into executive session at some point in time, once you are retained, to get your perspective on this particular issue, then we certainly can do so at that time. So if we can just get a brief introduction as to who you are and what your experiences are, and then we'll open it up to questions from the council. But I would also advise the council to be mindful that the purpose of this open session is not to talk about the actual potential litigation itself, but more so to talk about the idea that we want to retain an attorney and get a second opinion. Attorney.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk a little more. I've done litigation in state courts at all different levels. I've done litigation in federal courts, both in Massachusetts, Vermont, and Connecticut. And I've done work through the Attorney General's office against the Attorney General, and I'm very familiar with municipal issues, and I'd be honored to represent City Council in this matter.
Thank you.
I think the issue you're raising, without going into the merits, is an important issue, and merits resolution. Preferably a resolution that brings the parties together and leaves everyone respecting everyone else. But if potentially necessary, perhaps it would end up in litigation.
Thank you, Attorney Lesser. And I apologize if I'm mixing the two of you up. I only see one screen.
You got me right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I'm attorney Michael Alio. I practice with Tom, not for quite as long, but I've been with Tom for about a decade now. After law school, I got my start with a civil rights organization, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, where we did anti-discrimination claims based on race and national origin. A lot of my practice now is still focused on discrimination, employment discrimination claims, largely representing employees. But I have a diverse practice, including a lot of municipal law. And like Tom, I find the idea of working with you guys and representing the City Council very appealing. So, thanks for having us.
Thank you. We will now open it up for questions. I will try to go in the order in which I think they were raised. We'll start off with Councilor Walsh, followed by Councilor Gomez, and then Councilor Ramos. Councilor Walsh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can we now speak to whether or not we support the issue, or do you want us to wait?
You can
till later?
You can speak to whatever it is that you'd like to speak to, Councilor Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for bringing this up, and Councilor Letterman, I think you eloquently put before us what we all want to talk about. You know, I think this issue is more than just whether or not there should be a police commission. I think this strikes at the heart and soul of the council and the authority of the council and the role of the council. The council brought forward an issue. We voted on the issue. We sent it to the mayor. The mayor overrode the issue, and then it came back to the council, and the council overrode the veto. That to me is the heart of the matter. And I thought at that point that when the council overrode the mayor's veto, the matter should be law. And I would hope that this is what we can settle with this issue, because it's very important, not only for us, but for future councils. What is our role? And what does that veto mean? If it doesn't mean that you overturn the law, what does it actually mean? So I'm hoping we have a unanimous support to get a second opinion. And I'd like to say that at the focus meeting yesterday, I feel very strongly that the community is very concerned about a police commission, and there's a lot of support out there for it. So I'm going to support this motion.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Councilor Gomez, followed by Councilor Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Am I heard? I don't have my earpods in like as usual. I just want to make sure that I'm loud and clear.
You are heard.
Early on in my political career on this council, I supported a police commission. Like as always, I've stood in support of it. My mother was a police commissioner, spent many years on that police commission, and our former colleague also served with her, Timothy Ryan. And we fought and we organized And I remember times when, before I was part of this council, with even the police union, when it was charged by our colleague Michael Fenton. You know, this issue came about in 2014 and 2015. I think that we have precedents to show that, you know, we did have the authority, because if this ordinance was not valid, there would have been no need for him to veto it, right? So essentially, once he vetoed it, he created a claim, and I believe that it was applicable, but he chose not to support it. And I think, you know, the legal, I guess, persona behind that litigation on if it was applicable or not, then at the point of there was no need for us to override the veto. So essentially, he put it into play. I think that, you know, they read into if it was applicable or not. But I think that right now, this council, this order is appropriate. Moving into that direction, I know that going to Boston with other municipal elected officials, this is part of the points of the municipal 10-point plan from the Black and Latino caucus that Councilor Ramos and myself and were able to attend in conjunction with other municipalities. That there's number 9 was urging the mayor to declare racism as a public health crisis, and also number 10, which was one of those things that he reported. But we know from the process, Springfield leads on this, that we know that the CBHB isn't the answer. We know that we need more, something that the police cannot have oversight over the police. Not saying that, you know, we don't trust into police, but we need some community input. So not only that I support this, but I would like to be put on as a co-sponsor. And I also, when it's necessary, if I need to put in that motion so we can change the language so it could just reference the 2 attorneys and not their practices, I'll do so when it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. And you raised an excellent point. I think right now, Attorney Davis is probably the time in which those who want to be added as a co-sponsor of this order should speak up and have their name added. So if we could please add Councilor Gomez, that would be greatly appreciated as a co-sponsor. Councilor Ramos, followed by Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Williams, and Councilor Brown. I'll get to you after that. Councilor Ramos, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, thank you. First of all, you know, I think that my colleague covered the history pretty well. You know, this was one of the first votes that I took when I joined this, when I got elected to City Council. Our old friend, God rest his soul, Councilor Henry Twiggs, was one of the lead sponsors of the police commission ordinance that I voted for when I first got elected. And you know, it's been a long, drawn-out issue. Unfortunately, we're at the point where we've exhausted all other options, and it's unfortunate that it's gotten to this point. My first choice, as in any issue, is to work together and to work together with the administration to come up with a viable solution in the best interest of the city of Springfield. However, I can tell you that I've done everything that I could to work together with the mayor and his administration. As early as today, I had a conversation with the mayor's office about a potential compromise. However, the mayor made his position very clear, and he's not willing to move from his current position. So on this issue, so you know, we're left with no other choice. And as Councilor Walsh said, this is not about the mayor. This is not about the police commissioner. You know, I think a lot of us agree that the police commissioner is doing an exceptional job with certain exceptions. But she's doing, you know, a good job with the way that she's responded to the protests in the city. And she's done a lot of good things. So this vote that we're taking tonight is not an anti-Sarno vote. It's not an anti-Commissioner Clapper vote. It's a vote to clarify what, like Councilor Walsh said, the authority of the legislative body of the city of Springfield. You know, we're talking about we are the legislative authority of the city of Springfield. We have the authority to create law in the city. And the mayor is not above the laws that the Springfield City Council passes. So, you know, to me, this is about the power of the city council, the authority of the city council, the authority of the legislative body of the city of Springfield. It has nothing to do with what legislation it is. I don't care if it's a piece of legislation that talks about the height of mailboxes in the city, you know, whatever it is. It's just, if we create a law, then that law needs to be followed. So, you know, that's my piece. I have a lot more to say that I cannot say in open session. I'm hopeful that eventually we'll have an opportunity to speak to these gentlemen in executive session so that we can have an open discussion moving forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Ramos, Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Williams. You got to unmute, Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. Pleasure to meet you, Attorney Lesser and Attorney Alio. Mr. President, as far as I'm aware, this is the first time the City Council has been required to sue City Hall for not implementing the duly adopted ordinances of the city. To enforce the laws and ordinances is a responsibility attributed to the mayor in the charter of the City of Springfield. It gives me a profound sadness having to resort to this lawsuit, but it is my responsibility as a city councilor to provide oversight and to ensure that the check and balances are maintained. The decisions that we make regarding our police department will have a lasting effect on our community and police community relationships for years to come. I also want to echo Councilor the Dean of the Council, Councilor Walsh. This speaks to the soul of this council. For if we don't ensure that the check and balances are maintained, Mr. President, we might as well turn the keys in and go home. And I will fulfill my responsibility as a city council. As I mentioned, it gives me a profound sadness having to do this, but I will. It is my duty and my responsibility. Please add me as a co-sponsor to the order. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If we could please add Councilor Davila as a co-sponsor, it would be greatly appreciated. Councilor Williams, followed by Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. It really seems like forever ago when we were sitting or standing on the steps of City Hall to first introduce the police commission and how the City Council wanted to implement that piece of legislation. And, you know, this body did its due diligence and followed the process, which led, of course, to overriding the mayor's veto, as Councilor Walsh alluded to. And, you know, I'm concerned about the precedent that would be set if nothing is done about this issue of the police commission. I think that, you know, it lends its way to ordinances that this body passes and then override not be implemented as well. If we don't take action on this step today. I also believe that as a checks and balances to the mayor, you know, we often hear the term of the strong mayoral form of government. Well, I think there needs to be a deep dive in what that really means and to the charter as to what that really means as well, because it should not allow for what is taking place today. And I also want to echo the sentiments that this is not a strike against anyone in office currently. It's more about the process. And, you know, I think we've seen very minute but important steps being taken in the past couple of days coming from the mayor's administration, for example. And I would hope that, you know, this sheds light that we need to continue putting the foot to the fire and listening to the community as you know, the administration has for some things. So I think it's an important step. You can add me as a co-sponsor as well, Mr. President. And I just commend everyone for sticking to the issue and hopefully seeing that the police commission is reinstated. And just one last point, the counter argument that I often hear is that this is a political the police commission should not be implemented because it's a political stance. Well, I mean, you can look at the current civilian review board as the same type of deal. You can look at the fact that we don't have an independent lawyer as the same type of deal. These are all political decisions because we are elected officials. So everything we do and touch is political. So just leave you with that. And I want to thank you all again for being on board with this.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. Madam Clerk, if you could please add Councilor Williams as a co-sponsor, it would be greatly appreciated. Councilor Brown, followed by Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleagues for all the work that everyone has been doing and the ability for us to come together. It's disappointing that this one we can't work with the mayor on, but what's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Councilor Whitfield.
I don't have anything new to add, so I'm just going to ditto everything the colleagues have said, and I just want to make sure I'm added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you. Can you please add Councilor Brown as well as Councilor Whitfield as a co-sponsor? If there are any other individuals who would like to be added as a co-sponsor, since I don't see any other hands raised, if you want to just raise your hand at this time, and Councilor Walsh would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Councilor Edwards would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, Madam.
Mr. President, I think we have to make a motion on amending the document as in result of just with advice of the attorneys.
Point well taken, Councilor Gomez. You would like to make a motion, or Councilor Letterman, which
I can.
No, I would just like to motion that the document, which reflects what I'll let Councilor Letterman read it into the just reflective that it's only Attorney Lesser, and I apologize, the other gentleman last name I kind of having a hard time with, but just so it can reflect not their personal practices, but them personally alone as the pro bono individuals working for the city council.
So there's a motion made by Councilor Gomez that the city council is only retaining Attorney Aleo and Attorney Lesser independent of their firm. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is my motion.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So that there was a motion made by Councilor Gomez, seconded by Councilor Whitfield. Attorney Councilor Fenton on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. What is the reason for the motion?
The reason for the motion, I guess, that was explained by Councilor Letterman, was that the two gentlemen are acting alone and away from their practice, and not because the way it's written in the order, it has other individuals' last names that are on the order as being attained aside from them as individuals, from what I understood.
Councilor Letterman, did you want to assist in the clarification of that, unless Councilor Gomez has captured?
Councilor Gomez has certainly captured it, but I would also defer to Attorneys Lesser and Aleo if they'd like to share their thoughts on it as well.
Attorney Lesser, would you like to hear from Attorney Lesser and Aleo, Councilor Fenton?
I would.
Okay.
We just thought it was cleaner to have our names on there individually rather than the firm name, since we will be the two people doing the work with regard to the case, and no one else in the firm will be involved.
Okay.
So there is a motion on the floor made by Councilor Gomez, seconded by Councilor Whitfield. Madam Clerk, if there's no more discussion on the motion, can you please call the roll?
On the motion to amend the order for retaining counsel, Counselor Gomez.
Wait, can you clarify what you just stated? It's to amend, right? You said? Okay, yes.
To amend, yes.
Yes.
Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Davila?
My
Counselor
apologies.
Davila?
Yes.
Yes.
Attorney Davis? Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, my cousin started her car and I started going through her Bluetooth. I'm sorry. Counselor Fenton on amending the order?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Counselor Curran? Counselor Curran?
You're
Curran.
muted, Counselor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Counselor Ramos?
Counselor Ramos, can you say?
Can you all
say
hear
it
me?
again, Counselor Ramos? We can. Counselor Ramos, can you say yes or no again, sir?
Is he muted?
I cannot hear you, Counselor.
No, he was unmuted, but can't hear him. He's saying yes, but he's muted.
So I'll just, okay. Absent, Counselor Walsh?
Yes.
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 Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. And I'll go back. Counselor Ramos?
He did write yes in the chat. I mean, is that is that permissible, Madam
I don't
Clerk?
believe so. I don't believe so, but we should be all set. Counselor Hurst?
Yes, the motion passes. Counselor Ramos, you might want to log out and log back on so that you can be present for the vote, sir. Is there any other discussion before we move to a vote? Counselor Letterman.
Oh, I think Counselor Curran might be trying to say something. I would defer to Counselor Curran if he had something to say.
I did not see a hand raised.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Wait, is this a vote on the entire amendment?
No, that's what we're moving to now. As soon as we get Counselor Ramos back in, Counselor Fenton. Yes. So as soon as we get Counselor Ramos back in, we will.
You hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So we haven't taken the vote yet, Counselor Curran.
I mean, I'll let my views be known to the rest of the council. I've always been opposed to a police commission, as I believe it's very difficult to run a department of our size with 5 political appointees. But I certainly respect the passion of which the councilors are fighting to bring a police commission to the city of Springfield. But I do believe that when you look at the models from Boston to New York City, Philadelphia, Miami, all across the country for many of the major metropolitan cities, that a police commission model is the one most widely used. So I do understand that we are here all in a discussion on the role of police and how to make our police department as good as it can be. And I understand how passionate so many of our councilors are for the police commission. But I just feel that here in the city of Springfield, we've tried this model. This is not a new idea here. And I just feel that the police commission model that we do have and Commissioner Clapper's work, I think has been the direction that I think is the best fit for the city of Springfield. So I will be voting in opposition, but thank you for your input as well.
Thank you, Counselor Curran. And just to be clear, this is to retain an attorney. We are not voting, I'm sorry. This is to retain an attorney. This is not voting on whether we are in favor of a police commission or not, Councilor Curran. Councilor Fenton, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two things. The first is that the city solicitor is here, Ed Pakula, and I think that if he has something to say, he should be offered an opportunity to say it. So I would ask him that in the form of a question. And then when he's done, I would like to go into executive session to talk further about the potential litigation.
Solicitor.
Hello, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I learned about the meeting shortly before and spoke to the president about it. I'll say a couple of things. My opinion is well known. I think you've probably shared that written opinion with legal counsel, who it appears is you're about to retain this discussion. As you can imagine, do not want to see conflict between our bodies of government. However, this appears to be a foregone conclusion, and it would be my hope that working with Councilor Tom Lesser, who I've had many cases with, and Mr. Leo, who I am also familiar with some litigation, that perhaps we can avoid going to court over this, that perhaps there's some way to find some opportunity to resolve our differences and come behind a model that we can all be unified to make our police department better.
Thank you, Solicitor. Councilor Fenton.
I make a motion that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation strategy with the intent that we return.
I second the motion.
So there is a motion made by Councilor Fenton. There's a second made by Councilor Edwards. Is there any discussion on the motion? And Attorney Solicitor Pakula, you reached out to me beforehand, and you seem to have an issue with executive session. And I know we have two counselors whose hands are raised in the queue. Solicitor, did you want to speak to us going into executive session before we do so, or before we vote to do so?
So a couple things. The motion to go into executive session to discuss litigation strategy would not seem to be appropriate until you've retained counsel. I don't think you have a right to go into executive session to retain counsel. I think that is something that has to be done in open. I'm not trying to put any roadblocks in front of anything. I'm just trying to give the best advice I can. So if you do intend to go into executive session, I would assume, and for the purpose of discussing litigation strategy, that would occur after you have retained legal counsel.
Fair.
Thank you, Solicitor. There is a motion on the floor made by Councilor Fenton. It's been seconded by Councilor Edwards. Is there any further discussion on the motion? I see Councilor Gomez and Councilor Walsh's hand raised. Councilor Gomez.
So yes, that was actually my question. To go into executive session to dispose of this order first, And then the also question is, once we dispose of this order and vote it in, essentially, does that go into a conversation that the mayor what we're talking about, the powers of the city council, respectfully, that he can veto it, and then we have to override it, and then we procure the services of these gentlemen, and then we go into executive session. Just looking at for the formality of the process. I'm not trying to hold anything up. I just want to make sure that we're clear and we're going into that. Was I heard? I don't know if I was heard or not. I just want to make sure that I was clear on that.
No, you were heard. Was that in the form of a question, Councilor
Yeah,
Gomez?
I believe it's one that Attorney Pakula answered my first question.
Okay.
Specific to the order that's on the table now that we're discussing, that we need to dispose of this order, vote it up or down, and then from there we retain counsel. But essentially, now my second question is, do we retain the gentleman, or does that order, like any other pieces of order or ordinance or resolution, not a resolution, but any other piece of litigation, or legislation, goes to the mayor, and then he can he vetoes it, and then we have to override it? Because he's vetoed orders before. So essentially, I'm just asking for like a point of information. Essentially, is it appropriate for us to go into once we vote the order in, to go into executive session when we necessarily haven't really attained their services yet? Am I clear? I just wanted to just make sure that I understood it.
Solicitor, can you address Councilor Gomez's question, please?
Certainly. Counselor, you make a very good point. I have not researched this. I probably take some time and figure out an answer for you. I have a suggestion that you may want to consider, and that is that you vote to designate, because if I understand the order, you're designating the council president to enter into the engagement. And what may be the best thing to do is to have the vote on that, and then have your council president follow through on that, and then perhaps have an executive session at a different meeting. That's the best advice I could come up with here, to allow you to have some opportunity to carry out the purpose of this, on this, as opposed to from the law department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solicitor.
I think we should just vote, in my opinion, vote the order in, and then from there, you will be able to have the power to sign that paper. Because then once you have the power and there's no, there's no money being transferred left over and out, I think that we should be all right, in my opinion. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. On the motion to go into executive session, which is still on the table, Councilor Walsh, followed by Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just looking for a clarification. If we do vote to go into executive session, what happens to the motion? Do we vote on the motion before we go into executive session, or do we don't come back after executive session?
So we would vote on Solicitor.
If I may, as I said, I don't believe a motion to go into executive session is in order at this time. I believe it's a motion out of order, only because it would not be a proper grounds to go into executive session until you have a lawyer. So that, as Councilor Gomez indicated, there should be a vote first.
Thank you, Solicitor. There has not been.
The next step then is to vote on the motion that was put forward at the beginning of the meeting.
we've already voted on the next step would be to vote on the order. And so, but before we can vote on the order itself, we either need Councilor Fenton to withdraw his motion, or we need to vote on his motion to go into executive session. So on the motion, Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Testing 1, 2, 3. You guys hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Attorney Pikula, for that information. I just want to, I have several questions, but just to piggyback of Councilor Gomez's well-taken point. If we vote this order in first, as I understand Attorney Pikula's suggestion we do, when does that go into effect?
Solicitor.
Well, technically, it would be 10 days, but I think maybe you could do an order that would go into effect immediately, because this would give the president some opportunity to speak to legal counsel.
But how will we do that, Attorney Pikula, to go into effect immediately?
I think that if you amend the order again to ask that it go in as to have immediate effect.
Okay. If I may, Mr. President, I apologize. If I may, Mr. President, I would love to, if you indulge me, to hear Councilor Fenton's opinion on this matter.
Yes, he actually has raised his hand, so he is next to speak.
I yield to him then.
So on the motion, Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Eddie, for providing that insight. I don't have any objection to the attorneys not being on the executive session. I would be fine to talk with my colleagues about the potential litigation strategy that we might have without attorneys Lesser or Aiello there. I understand the solicitor's point, so I'll be fine with asking them to drop off. I just think that before we go through the exercise of hiring an outside firm to represent us on a pro bono basis, we ought to have a conversation as a group about what the intentions are here. And so that's why I think we should go into executive session. But in light of the solicitor's comments, I think we can do it without attorneys Lesser or Aiello.
So there is still a motion on the floor made by Councilor Fenton and seconded by Councilor Edwards. Is there any other discussion on the floor? Councilor Letterman?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, I do support Councilor Fenton's motion. I think, as several councilors have pointed out, we are embarking on something that is a bit different for the city council, although I would argue not quite as unprecedented as some might say it is. Certainly legislative bodies and executives engage in legal engagement regularly in both municipalities and states and the federal government. So, the judicial is the third branch of government. Certainly it's there for a reason, although we are not voting tonight to litigate. But I also think that if folks feel that there is a conversation that needs to be had in executive session prior to their vote, then I respect that and would support it.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Solicitor, followed by Councilor Davila.
Just one more point of information from a legal standpoint. On the motion to go into executive session, you need to declare whether you will be returning to regular meeting or not returning.
It would seem to me that if we're going to vote, then we need to vote in open session. Is that accurate, Solicitor?
Yes.
So if we do make a motion, it would seem to me that we would make a motion to return, and then we can work out the logistics with Madam Clerk in a few moments. Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Fenton.
Apologies. Just to 2 quick points, just to clarify, Councilor Fenton motions to go into executive session. Is that with or without the attorneys?
Councilor Fenton?
Without, and I thought when I made the motion the first time, it was with the intention to return. If I didn't say
Okay,
that,
yep.
You did, I heard you.
Okay,
then that was,
You very
and
well
so that
may
I'm
have.
clear then, and so that Solicitor, if I may, you mentioned that we have to amend the order to say that it goes into effective immediately.
Solicitor.
You're not going to have your lawyer in there.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Counselor Fenton, I see your hand raised, sir. Did you want to speak again, or?
that was from before, sorry.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded by Counselor Edwards. Seeing that there are no other hands raised, Madam Clerk, before I ask you to call the roll, can you just reiterate to us what is going to happen? Are we going to log off and log back into the second link that you sent to the email, to our email addresses?
Yes, so if the council votes to go into executive session, I sent each of you an email a little after 4 o'clock today with the separate link for the executive session. So what the council would have to do is leave this meeting, the open meeting, open your email and go into the second link for just the executive session. And once the executive session was over, you'd have to close, leave the meeting then again, and come back into the open meeting link.
Thank you, Attorney Davis. Counselor Letterman.
I just had a clarifying point before we vote on the motion, which is for folks who will not be coming into the executive session, such as Attorneys Lesser and Alio or any of the news media that's watching via Zoom specifically, should they just stay on this meeting since we will be coming back?
That might be more of a technical question. Is it?
I agree,
For folks at Springfield, can they stay on? Is that possible?
We'll have to end the meeting to start the next session.
Okay, so we have to end this meeting in Zoom, log into our other meeting, and then they'll just have to continuously make attempts to get back in. Is that accurate? Sounds like that's accurate. Okay, so the other question that I have for you, Counselor Fenton, before we take the vote, are we including the solicitor as part of the executive session or no? I didn't hear you say it in your motion, so I just want to make sure I'm clear and the solicitor knows what his role would be.
No, that's up to him. I mean, I'm not trying to preclude any attorney's participation from the executive session, but if the concern is that we can't go into executive session with attorneys we haven't hired yet, then I'm fine with leaving Attorneys Lesser and ALO out. So I don't care whether the solicitor's on or not. He's welcome to attend, but from my perspective, I would like an opportunity for us to discuss this as it is a potential litigation matter amongst ourselves out of open session. That's all.
Fair enough. On the motion, Counselor Whitfield, I did see your hand raised before we vote.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel comfortable with Attorney Pakula joining executive session if we're going to discuss litigation strategy, because I think that he's the one who will be on the, I don't want to call you the opposer, but you would be on the opposing side. And I don't think it's wise to discuss any type of litigation or any type of strategy with the opposition. So I'm gonna ask that the solicitor not join executive session.
So it is Counselor Fenton's motion. And so if Counselor Fenton makes his motion, including the solicitor, then we will either vote that motion up or vote it down.
That's a different motion, because that's not what he said in the beginning. So is that a different motion? Because that's not the motion that Counselor Edwards second.
We will allow Counselor Fenton to make his motion again once we finish discussion, and he can be as clear or as vague as Councilor Fenton wants to be, and we will have the opportunity to vote it up or vote it down, depending on what folks feel. Councilor Ramos.
Mr. President, I think the best way to move forward is to first vote to retain the attorneys, in my opinion, and then go into executive session with our new attorneys to discuss the litigation strategy. Just my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Ramos. Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Williams.
Yes, I just want to, I hear Councilor Ramos' comment, but I just wonder, just referencing what Solicitor Pikula said a little while ago, we will have to amend in order to say that goes into effect immediately. And I will let those that are wiser than me to address that issue, just to caution on that. And as far as whether or not the solicitor is there, I understand Councilor Whitfield's point, and this one that makes sense to me. However, I would like to hear from the solicitor himself, what are his thoughts and his legal opinion, because he's supposed to advise as well the council. Do you see any potential issues with you participating or not participating in this executive session?
So Councilor Davila, to your first point, there will be a time either after we dispose of this motion or before, if this motion fails, to make an amendment to have this order go into effect immediately. So that certainly will happen or can happen if it is your will for it to happen at any point in time during open session. Solicitor, to Councilor Davila's second point.
There's a practical point, and that is I don't have a link to executive session. So I couldn't join you if I wanted to. Second, look, I do not want to try to put roadblocks in your attempt to get to court. I want this resolved just as much as I think everyone else does. Perhaps having counsel like esteemed Tom Lester and esteemed Michael Aleo may actually aid in a process where we can talk about this. I could be wrong. I may be shooting myself in the foot, but I am of the opinion that the best case is a settled case. And so if there's some way to resolve this, that's what I want to do.
I love your optimism, Solicitor Pikula. Councilor Williams, followed by Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. President. On a lighter note, when I have this many lawyers around me, I start to get nervous. But I will say that I actually agree with Councilor Ramos in the sense that I'm leaning towards voting for representation in the form of legal counsel as initially proposed, and then going into preferably with them there to talk about the strategy that they would be kind of carrying out. I mean, I don't know what is to be discussed in terms of strategy without the lawyers present who would be intricate and, intricately involved in this. So I actually second Councilor Ramos's point.
And it probably would also make sense, just as a point of clarification, for us to, if this passes, for somebody to actually sign the engagement letter before we go into any executive session. Councilor Gomez, followed by Councilor Letterman.
So yeah, my on the motion, just so I can stay focused on the motion, I think that what's important here, and indeed, is that we need to from what I understand, there's a overwhelming support for this order, essentially, which is from who have spoken out. I can count, right? That's one thing that numbers don't lie. So we know that we have overwhelming support of co-sponsors and moving forward. We know that these gentlemen are the gentlemen that we're looking to attain pro bono. But Also, if it's not immediately, one thing that Attorney Pakula has stated is that there is a window of 2 weeks where some of these executive sessions and things can come into play, where we can talk to them about if it is strategy. But essentially, one, I can appreciate the fact that we want to go in and have a conversation amongst ourselves, right, as a body, as a, but then secondly, if we are going to do it for the sake of us logging out of another link to log on another link to keep the media pressured and waiting and not knowing if we're going to get on or focus, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, essentially, that we have to take heed on, signing off a link, signing on to a link. So then some of our colleagues that have technological difficulties to sign on and what's linked and what not linked, we're going to end up fumbling this. And for the sake of not fumbling it, I rather disperse of the order, make the amendment, and then go into executive session, because then regardless, remember, on time frame, right? So we can put something in, it's not that it goes into immediately, or it has a 24-hour window, so then we can talk before Counselor Hurst can sign the document. Essentially, that eliminates this room. The room is canceled out. We go into executive session, and then from there we don't have to return at all, and we can go along our business. And that's just my opinion. But for the sake of, having the conversation regardless, and not having those gentlemen in, we can still, what was the word that I had a complicated, embargo the signing by 24 hours and not necessarily immediately, which here nor there, that portion of the time frame of when, how, is entirely up to the will of the body. But the only way we can make those amendments is if we disperse of this this motion. Regardless, we know that we want to go into an executive session, but essentially, there's certain strategic steps that we can take that it benefits everybody to make sure that we've negotiated to make sure that we don't have to come back to open session to discuss something that we're going to discuss already for a long period of time, because we don't know when we're coming out. So we're going to essentially have people here or folks waiting maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, who knows? And it's going to come back, and the transparency is going to have a fold in it.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. Councilor Letterman, followed by Councilor Edwards, and then I see Councilor Walsh's hand raised in the queue. Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I would just say, I hear where everybody's coming from. I do think that if we have members that would like to go into executive session, we should. I won't profess to speak for them, but they may have something that they want to share for some reason that we don't know yet, that could impact litigating position, that impacts their vote here today. So certainly we, in order for, I think, to reach a resolution, we do need a united front. And I think that we should be respectful of our colleagues if they'd like to go into executive session. It sounds as if some folks are amenable to that. And so, I mean, we're debating it at length. That's certainly within our rights and our reasons. But I am curious to hear, what Councilor Fenton would have to say. So that's my position on it.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Councilor Edwards, followed by Councilor Walsh.
Well, my feeling is that it's just on the motion itself, it's been complicated trying to figure out how to manage this situation. So that being said, I'm not opposed to going into executive session, but for the sake of moving this forward, as Councilor Adam Gomez stated, I believe that I can count, and from my understanding or belief, is that there is a majority of the councilors who are interested in obtaining these lawyers. I'm also very much interested in hearing what Councilor Fenton has to say, but I think the appropriate thing would be to do is for me to withdraw my second, allow somebody else to make the second if they choose to. But I think we need to get about doing the business. For us to now argue, as you see, is this long over just whether or not who should be in the room and things would not be fair either to the press or to any attorneys that might be sitting in waiting for us to figure out what we want to do. The best way for us to manage most things is publicly. The reason that we're having these Zoom meetings is so that the public can have transparency as to what we're doing. When we go into executive session, we don't necessarily have to talk, or when we're in public session, as I say, we don't necessarily have to talk about the strategies. But Attorney Bakula is correct. And even with the retaining of the lawyers, hopefully we never have to go to court. Hopefully we can come to an agreement with the administration that gives us what we want. We may not have the confidence as it stands today of doing that, but the thing is that once we win or whether we lose, but whenever this battle over the issue of the legalities of his authority to appoint a commissioner versus a chief, then we start to have the argument, and we'll have a long debate about the makeup of what a commission would be and who would be on and how what their function and stuff will be. So I'm withdrawing my second. If someone else wants to put it forward, that's fine. But that's where I'm at right now, and I'm not opposed to either way. But I think more things done publicly, the better. When it comes to the specific strategy of how our attorneys or a attorney would represent us in court, that obviously needs to be an executive session, but we're not there yet.
So there's a motion on the floor that no longer has a second since Councilor Edwards has withdrawn his second. Councilor Walsh, I see your hand raised. I'd imagine it's on the motion, but it doesn't sound like there's a second to that motion. Is there another person who would like to second that motion?
I will second.
So there's a motion on the floor, seconded by Councilor Allen. Councilor Walsh on the motion to go into executive session.
I would prefer that we take a vote on the matter first and then go into executive session. We have no idea how long we would be in executive session. This is a meeting that wasn't supposed to last as long as it's lasting. And I don't know when we would come back. I'd much rather vote on the motion and then go into executive session. And I don't know what the order of the motions are. Do we have to take the executive session first and then the next one?
So there's a motion on the floor made by Councilor Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Allen. And so we would have to dispose of that motion. So if that motion passes to go into executive session, then we are going into executive session. And then we would return in open session to vote potentially. So everybody would wait. Councilor Curran on the motion, followed by Councilor Letterman.
Just quickly, I do not think we need to go into executive session. I don't think that is necessary. And just to expedite this meeting, I think we should just get on and take a vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Curran. Councilor Letterman, followed by Councilor Davila.
I agree we should get on and take a vote with it. I just wanted to say for clarification that some folks have said a couple of times, I think that if we take the vote to retain tonight and we dispose of the order through that method, I don't think we have the option of then going into executive session. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what the president was saying is at a future date, we would then have an executive session. But if I'm incorrect, certainly.
That is accurate. At a future date. It doesn't make sense to go into executive session if we haven't retained the attorneys. And so we can't retain the attorneys until either 10 days or immediately if an amendment is made. And I need to sign the engagement letter based on the order. So on the motion, Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Gomez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to say that I'm inclined to agree with my colleagues who have stated that we should move along and vote on this motion. Again, I just want to emphasize at the proper time that we make that amendment, that it will go into effect immediately.
You have made
You
have made that clear, Councilor Davila. Councilor Gomez.
Yes. Just again, we need to dispose of this motion on the floor, vote it down, then vote the order in so that we can proceed with what we want to accomplish. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. So there is a motion on the floor made by Councilor Fenton to go into executive session without Attorney Elio and Attorney Lesser, seconded by Councilor Allen. On the motion,
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, sir.
just quickly, maybe this could help expedite the process if we could. Perhaps, I'm not sure if Councilor Fenton withdraws his motion so that we can go on and vote on this.
If Councilor Fenton wants to withdraw, then Councilor Fenton can raise his hand and
Right.
withdraw. So your point is well taken. Councilor Fenton is probably more savvy on the rules than certainly I am. So if Councilor Fenton would like to withdraw his motion, then he can withdraw his motion. Doesn't seem like that is going to happen. So on the motion, Councilor Fenton.
I'm not going to withdraw, but I love you guys, but we could have already been in an executive session. I don't want to hire a lawyer without talking to them privately first. It's a reasonable request.
Fair enough. There is a motion made by Councilor Fenton to go into executive session. I believe it requires a roll call majority vote to go into executive session. Madam Clerk, on the motion,
On the
can you
motion
please
to
call the
go-
roll?
On the motion to go into executive session, Counselor Gomez.
No.
No. Counselor Field.
No.
No. Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Curran.
No.
No. Counselor Ramos.
No.
No. Counselor Walsh.
No.
No. Counselor Williams.
No.
No. Counselor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards.
No.
No. Counselor Brown.
No.
No. Counselor Hurst.
No. If there is no, is Councilor Letterman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I expect we're going to be proceeding to a vote soon. I just had one more question, an issue that I wanted to raise and allow the attorneys to speak on, just so the entire council is aware as we take the step to raise, which is an issue that I've discussed with them and clarified for my clarification. But I do think that the council should be aware and able to understand one point, which is I did ask for Mr. Lesser and Mr. Aleo to give me their thoughts on the fact that they do have in their capacity with their legal firm a partner, Bill Newman, who's familiar to all of us, who in a separate capacity from his legal partnership with them at the law firm is also a part-time counsel to the ACLU, which regularly does engage in different types of litigation, including in the city of Springfield. And I have asked them if they believe that could present a conflict. They've indicated that they have done the research on this and do not believe that it would present a conflict. But what I have asked them to do is to discuss that with you today, as well as to just do a formal request to the Board of Bar Overseers to confirm that it would not be a conflict, similar to us doing any sort of similar to the type of steps that we would take to ensure no conflicts exist. So I asked for them to do that in whether we move forward tonight or not with them before we took any additional votes for litigation, just to make sure that we all are in agreement on that. So in my conversations with them regarding this, I am comfortable with it, but I do want the council to be informed of it. They would certainly, they're certainly here to talk about it as well. And I would have brought it up earlier, but we went on a whole other diatribe. So I certainly do want folks to be aware of that. And I would invite, Attorney Lesser and Attorney Aleo to speak to if anybody does have concerns or questions.
Thank you, attorneys. If one of you would like to briefly explain, it'd be greatly appreciated. And Councilor Gomez, I will get to you after they give their explanation. I think you guys are on mute.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Briefly, the issue that Councilor Letterman raised is one of the partners in the law firm, Bill Newman, works part-time for the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, which is in litigation presently with the city of Springfield on a Freedom of Information Act request. It's not our position it's not our feeling at the present time that there is a conflict, but we're happy to go to the Board of Bar Overseers and address that issue with them as Councilor Letterman suggests.
Thank you, Attorney Counselor Gomez. You
Yeah.
have your hands raised. Your hand
Yeah,
raised.
thank you, Mr. President, because I really want to move this along. What was the point of us or me amending them off the document and there's no conflict? I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty upset, like all due respect. What was the point, right? What was the point of me just amending them solely because so we can stay away from the conflict? Why are we adding to it? Like now you guys got me feeling like what was the point of amending them just being the only ones on the document? If now there's a conflict supposedly, when the reason why we amended the document to just say it's lesser and the other gentleman that we're obtaining, it's like we amended them so then because they were their partners, we come into conflict solely them. I don't think there's a conflict. I think now we're stretching this out. I appreciate you telling us that, but essentially there was a reason why we amended the document for it to state that it was Attorney Lesser and the other gentleman that were solely the ones, and it did not attach. And it goes back to what City Councilor Michael Fenton asked. What was the point of us amending it and then going through that process when we've already detached them away from their practice? So, like, I appreciate you bringing it up, but coño, man, like.
Thank you, Counselor Gomez, Counselor Letterman, followed by Counselor Whitfield.
Oh, I would just say, I appreciate Councilor Gomez's frustration. I agree. I do not believe a conflict exists. The attorneys do not believe a conflict exists. However, I felt it necessary because this is something that came up today in my discussions with them to disclose it to you, my colleague, prior to you taking a vote on it. So that is my reason. Again, I don't believe a conflict exists. They do not believe a conflict exists. But before we vote to retain them, you should be aware of the fact that we do not believe a conflict exists.
Thank you, Counselor Letterman. Counselor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say that I appreciate your transparency, Counselor Letterman. I don't know that one makes me want to go to an executive session, but it's too late because we already voted that out. So we could have discussed that there. So now I feel a little bit weird myself that it was brought up, but I do appreciate what you were trying to do and being transparent with the information. So I just wanted to say that. And I understand how you're feeling too, Counselor Gomez, because I feel a little bit on the inside too, that it was kind of weird to vote for them to be sole and then bring up that it could have a conflict. So we kind of like got rid of the conflict when we voted them solely. So it just gave me a weird feeling, but I appreciate your candidness and transparency.
Thank you, Counselor Whitfield, Counselor Walsh, followed by Counselor Davila.
I'd like to say it's been disclosed. Let's move on. It probably isn't going to end up being a problem. Let's do what we have to do to move forward on this issue tonight.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Counselor Walsh, Counselor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Walsh. We should move forward as quickly as possible. Before we do that, I feel obliged to ask one question of the solicitor based upon this point that Councilor Letterman brought up. Can we get your thoughts on it, solicitor, on Councilor Letterman's point?
Is this the point? Is whether there's a conflict or not?
Yes.
Yeah, right. I just wonder what you're thinking.
I'm really not sure. When I run into these situations, I'm a member of the Mass Bar Association, and they have a service which provides assistance in these types of situations. And it sounds like Attorney Lesser and Leo are going to do something like that, and I would not make a judgment call on this without having some further chance to make sure I know all the facts and all of the background. It sounds like you guys, some of you may have some more information that I don't have. So I'm not prepared to make a call on that right now. As I said, I don't want to stand in anyone's way here. You know, you guys are exercising your rights as counselors. I disagree with the underlying lawsuit. You see, I've given you my opinion on that. I'd like to do whatever I can to try to help facilitate a resolution of this conflict. That's my goal.
Thank you, Solicitor. Thank you, Councilor Davila. If there are no further questions, and I do not see any hands raised in the queue, if there are no further amendments, then Madam
Mr.
Clerk.
President, just to make sure that
Now's the time, Victor.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, indeed. I just want to let me pull it up here for quick. Just to make a motion to reflect that this order should go into effect immediately, as it was pointed out by the solicitor.
So there's a motion on the floor to have this order go into effect immediately. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Gomez. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on the motion?
On the motion to amend the order so it is effective immediately, Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Williams?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst?
Yes, the motion passes. If there's no further discussion on the order, this requires a majority roll call vote for passage. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On approving the order to retain counsel as amended, Councilor Gomez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton?
No.
No. Councilor Curran?
No.
No. Councilor Ramos?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Williams?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst?
Yes, the order is approved. Madam Clerk, is there any further business before the council?
There is no further business before the council.
Seeing none, councilors, have a great day. Have a great evening.